Hey guys, in this video we're going to go over Wheelbase and how that affects the RC you choose. This is Wheelbase 101, and what we'll do here is we'll go over how Wheelbase affects the vehicle. You know, there's more to choosing an RC by just what looks cool and that sort of thing. Wheelbase plays a major role, not to mention the class of vehicle you get as well. In this video, we're going to go over the whole works for you, let you know what Wheelbase does, how it affects the handling of the vehicle, and so forth. Check this out. Okay, so let's get right into this with car style. Now, there's different styles of cars and the classes are different. This is short course, this is more of a racing buggy style. These are bashers and each one has its own place. This is a buggy, this is a truggy, but this one's been extended, and this one is a full-on bashing truck, which is a monster truck style, but this one has a low center of gravity, which keeps it more in the performance end of things. If you want to get full monster truck, the X-Max, which is a very big truck, has the high center of gravity and is more like a true monster truck. But each one has its place. Now, this is Italian, and this is the XL version. We've stretched it with the Mojave chassis, and that gives it a longer wheelbase. And there's a cool part to that. Now, here's the difference, and this is the wide variety, and we're just going to stick with the 6S platform for ARMA as an example here. This applies to everything, but this here is the Mojave chassis, and it is a very long chassis. This is the Outcast or the Typhon chassis, and see how much shorter this is? It's a much shorter chassis, but it has the same power plant, and that makes a pretty big difference. Now, in this video, we're definitely going to get into that, but the longer the chassis is, the more stable the car is, because let's look at it this way. This is a Typhon, it's a really short car. This is Italian, it's generally the same size as the Creighton, but with the Mojave chassis, it stretches about 1.75 inches farther, which gets that weight out more. And this plays a bit of a role in this capacity. When you have, this is a Creighton chassis, so this is a mid-range chassis for this. The Mojave is longer and the Typhon is shorter, but you have the same power plant. So with a 2050 motor, and we'll figure a 185 speed control, 6S power, and the size of the tires, which also plays a role, you have from A to B where my fingers are attached. This is roughly where your differentials will sit. And with that kind of power, when you stand on the throttle, it's going to want to lift because of the inertia from the tires. As you gain that power, those spin up and they put this kind of rotation on the chassis. Okay, that's cool because that gets those really cool wheel stands and everything looks really neat when that happens. But if you stretch this chassis out and you get to the Mojave chassis, now you're moving basically the same weight over a longer distance and it's going to rotate slower. When you get in the air, you're also going to have a slower rotation because the farther you get from center, the more power it takes to rotate that same amount of mass. And like I say, these chassis here all have the same power plant. So you're looking at the same torque rating. The only difference is the weight and size of the tires. Now, the upside to that is on this short chassis, which is the Typhon chassis, this is a really short wheelbase and it has really small tires. Look at the difference in tires here. You can see the Typhon tires are really small in comparison to the Creighton tires, which are also about the same size as this one here. It's got the Outcast tires on it and they weigh quite a bit. They actually have a little more weight to them, and more of that weight is centered on the outside of the tire, which gives it more mass when you try to torque it up, which makes that Outcast stand up. The thing is, the Outcast is on this really short chassis, and that means when you give it throttle, the short chassis is going to stand up real easy because the distance between center from end to end is shorter. So the same horsepower basically is going to have a lot more effect on that shorter chassis. Now that's not a bad thing. That's where it comes into where you need to decide what you want your car for. And that is something you really should think about when trying to choose a car. Unfortunately, there's a lot more to it than that, because when you go to pick an RC, it really does matter what car speaks to you, and that's a thing. You know, if you like the buggy class, this is just a 6S Typhon from Arma, and it is a cool machine, but it has its limitations as to where you can run it because of tire size, length of chassis, and how it handles. When you want to get into rougher terrain, that's where you get into these bigger vehicles, and this is a really cool looking truck. This is a Creighton EXB, and it is a very durable machine once you get a certain amount of upgrade on it. However, with the longer chassis, this still is fully capable of doing wheelies, but it's a bit more controllable than, say, the Outcast with that short wheelbase. It's really difficult just to keep the front wheels on the ground. And if you're trying to do some cool stunting and things of that nature, the longer chassis cars, and this is low to the ground. See how the body has a little different design to it? It's low to the ground, it's sleek, it's fast. This is, out of the box, the fastest one of the three. But we had to stretch the chassis out to see how that would handle, and that made an enormous difference in the car. It rotates much more controllably in the air, and on the ground you can spin the tires without necessarily getting that front end up, but when you put the heavier tires on it like these, it stands up pretty easily. But when you switch it over to, say, the Fire Team tires or something a little lighter like that, you can spin them and take off, and it doesn't necessarily pick those wheels in the front up off the ground, and it makes a pretty enormous difference, and it all plays into wheelbase. But let's say none of these speak to you. Let's say, for example, you want a short course vehicle. Weight matters, but most of those are in the same category as far as wheelbase goes. So the stability of the car is going to be very heavily dependent on the weight of the vehicle. We've got a 6S over here. It weighs a lot more than, say, the 3S. But up top here, we've got three more of those, and each one weighs a little bit different. The heavier weight will get you down on the ground better. It'll ground it. It'll get you a bit more traction. The really light ones can be skittish and a lot harder to control. And wheelbase isn't a thing, but if you want longer wheelbase, that's where you step up to the 7th scale and you go to the Mojave. It's basically the same type of vehicle, but it's got this platform to it, and it has more power, but it's a bigger car, and thus the extra weight and the longer wheelbase make it handle much better. But then again, what about style? Because style makes a big difference. This is the Fire Team, and this is a unique looking vehicle, and if that speaks to you, this is also a long wheelbase vehicle, but it does have its own issues with the weight of the body, the higher center of gravity. It really does handle good, and with the longer wheelbase, it manages to keep the front wheels on the ground good. But if that doesn't speak to you, and none of these do, this is the Losi DBXLE 2.0, and it's a 5th scale car, but as you get bigger, you also get more expensive. That's the way these things work. This one runs in right at about $1,200. These are much more affordable for what they are, and they're still super fast. If you get into this one here, this is the Creighton 8S, and it is a beast of a car too. It's got a fairly long wheelbase to it, but it still can stand up like that because the tires are also larger, which give you that inertia, and that inertia is what causes it to stand or break down onto the nose when you hit the brakes. Still, there's other types of vehicles as well. This is a true representation monster truck. This is Son of a Digger, and this is the Losi LMT, and it's built exactly like a monster truck. Notice how close the wheelbase is though. It's got a really short wheelbase, which allows it to stunt very easily. If you're gonna go out and race, this isn't necessarily the vehicle to take. With the short wheelbase, it really doesn't handle all that well. With a longer wheelbase vehicle, a slightly larger version of this, it probably would handle pretty good, but with the short wheelbase, it definitely affects the handling. So let's take a second and look at all three of these chassis. And like I say, this applies to all the different cars out there, not just these. These are just the samples that we have, and you're gonna see right here the difference in wheelbase. Let's get these sorted out for you so that you can see them in order. We'll try and get the ends here all at the same elevation so you can see the difference in length. The one on your right, which basically the left here, let's Get this right here. This one is the Typhon, this one is the Creighton, this one is the Mojave, and they're all the same length at the end, but you can see the difference in chassis length. This one is always going to handle better because it stretches that weight out, which makes it more controllable. This one, which is the Creighton chassis, is kind of middle of the road. It gets the best of both worlds. You can stunt with it and yet still control it for racetrack environments and things of that nature. You can pin it a lot easier without getting those front wheels in the air, which gives you better control. Yet if you pull the trigger all the way, it's gonna get the wheels in the air and it's gonna be impressive. The Outcast runs this short one and the front wheels are in the air most of the time when you're at 6S. It's a bit more controllable at 4S, but it's really exciting in 6S, and when you get it in the air, this will do triple backflips, where this one might pull a double, and you'll be lucky to pull a single with this one, all with the same size tires. So the rotation on the long chassis is much slower than the rotation on the short chassis. So that brings us to the question, which one do you choose? Well, it really does matter what you plan to use the car for. If you want stunting, the shorter chassis is going to get you there a lot easier. If you want controllability, but you still want some of that stunting ability as well, the mid-range chassis really does hit the point there. But if you want that control, if you want less dive in the air, more or less raise when you get on the throttle, the longer chassis is definitely going to get you there. And the reason for that is pretty simple. There are three things that really matter to that particular thing: tire size and weight. That is the first one. That really plays a role in how it controls in the air, how it controls on the ground, how everything works within the car, because that weight on the externals is what gives you that pull and torque when you're not touching the ground or when you're full into the brakes. Now, the thing is, that's only part of it. The other part of it, of course, is the wheelbase that we're talking about. And as you span that weight out, the wheelbase makes a huge difference on how it transfers the energy from one to the other. And of course, the third thing that really plays a role is battery size. And it's something we barely touch on here, but the battery size makes a huge difference. If you run your car at 6S, which is what it's capable of, just because a car is capable of 6S doesn't mean that's where it runs the best. At 6S, generally we break stuff at 6S, but at 6S, these things really shine. And it's not just these. The Sledge from Traxxas, same thing. It doesn't matter the brand, because all of these brands have to go by the same physics, and it's wheelbase length, weight of torque for the tires, and the power plant driving them. If you put 4S on this one, these are really sketchy tires in the air, and the thing is, when you come over a jump and you don't time your brake right to get that nose down, and you come in just a little bit early, you lock those up and it'll roll all the way over on its top because of the tire's inertia. When you stop that weight, that's mass in motion, which transfers it to the chassis, which causes it to rotate over quickly. That's the tires that do that. Now you can counter that a little bit with the length of the wheelbase, but the tires themselves are still going to do that job. The ones on the Creighton, they're lighter, they don't have as much skin weight to them, and so when you brake, it's less than the Outcast ones, so you get less jumpiness on your brakes and your acceleration. So if you're trying to get that nose up, depending on how you leave the ramp, you're going to get more reaction out of these tires from the Outcast than you will from the Creighton tires, and you almost don't notice it at all on the Typhon because those are so small. These are such a small tire, there's not a lot of mass there, and you can brake a lot earlier to get that nose down. But if you come off of the Typhon and do the same thing on the long one at the end, that one's going to land on its top because it's going to rotate over so much faster. That's not the wheelbase's issue as much as it is tire size. Still, the wheelbase does counter that nicely. So to sum it all up for you, wheelbase plays a pretty big difference. However, tire size, power plant size, battery size, that all contributes. So when choosing your car, you have to ask yourself what you're looking for. Do you want the cool, like Nate for the channel? He likes that cool back flip, front flip, cartwheeling. He doesn't care about parts. He wants to see the action the car is capable of regardless of the cost to the car itself. So he likes the short wheelbase cars. Now, I like better control, so I like the longer stuff. It gives you more action in the corners, more controllability. You can get around people and get out front a lot easier with the long wheelbase car. But we're talking speed and performance here. If you want to stick with like the scale type trucks, the LMT, if you don't push it to its potential and you just use it for what it's designed for, it's an amazing truck to drive. And of course, all of this plays a role in what you choose for your vehicle. If you know what you're looking for, and now you know what the handling characteristics of the cars are going to be due to the wheelbase power plant and that, you can make an informed decision. Now, keep in mind that a lot of this is our opinion, but physics are physics. The farther you get from center, the less reaction that weight has on the vehicle. The closer you get to center, the quicker things will rotate. And just think about it like this. A figure skater with their arms out rotates slowly, okay? That's because the mass is wide. But if you watch them bring their arms into here, they'll spin so fast you can hardly tell what's going on till they throw their arms back out. It's the same physics that apply on these. I hope this is helpful, guys. It's not a super long video, but it should answer the question of wheelbase. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. It's awesome when you do. And you know, we really like helping. These one-on-one videos, they're put together to answer a question. If you guys have anything you can add to this one, please feel free to leave it in the comments down below and help others along the way. Hey guys, I'm AJ with AJ Jam Studios saying, keep bashing, guys.